sword is sharp, my shield unbound, my pride will waver not. I face my foe, I lay them low, I fight them without fear. If I should fall and walk no more, I shall not shed a tear. But war is cruel, my comrades die, and I go on alone. I will not stop to ask them why, I know I can't go home. I face my foe, I lay them low, I fight them without fear. If I should fall and walk no more, I shall not shed a tear. My back is broke, my armor's rent, my blood is on the field. My sword is gone, my body spent, I lie upon my shield. I faced my foe, they laid me low, but I go with a smile. The labyrinth, it calls to me. I'll wander it a while. The labyrinth, it calls to me. I'll wander it a while. My eyes are clear, my back is strong, my harness free of rot. My sword is sharp, my shield unbound, my pride will waver not. I face my foe, I lay them low, I fight them without fear. If I should fall and walk no more, I shall not shed a tear. But war is cruel, my comrades die, and I go on alone. I will not stop to ask them why, I know I can't go home. I face my foe, I lay them low, I fight them without fear. If I should fall and walk no more, I shall not shed a tear. My back is broke, my armor's rent, my blood is on the field. My sword is gone, my body spent, I lie upon
thank you for coming along to the stream. And John's already spotted it. So with what I've called the stream, he says, "Was this seem like the Empire version of the good, the bad, and the ugly?" Funny that, but heresy is going to be a common theme, I think, in all of these. So if there's any audio issues, peaky mic. I think I need a new mic. To be honest, so I've turned myself down. Is it just quiet? Is it loud for people? If everyone else say something, see what everyone else.
Is this volume good? Can you hear me?
Hi, how does this work for everyone? Are we good? Bit quiet.
Okay, let's turn people up a bit. Alright, so it was very quiet in general and getting quieter. Like you're in a soup pot. Okay, I'll turn them up. Turn me up. Turn them up. How you're in a soup pot? Yeah. Are we? Can you hear us all now? I've turned us up a little bit.
How's this for everyone?
Any better? Good, bad? I'm not fine, but thank you.
Your hair is fine. Your hair is very on point tonight. Like a mane.
You'd be amazed at how much of this will hide under the mask.
Much better. Excellent. Okay, I think it was all just very quiet. So I've turned us up a bit, and so we'll plod on, and we'll go from there. So we're carrying on with the virtues sort of chat. Matt, you might need to turn yourself up a little bit again. Just do your just update.
I don't know if that's any better.
Yeah, that's much better. Is everyone else happy with that? So we're doing this. We've got the theme of the virtues and stuff like that because we tried to fit it into one video, and then I think we came to the conclusion after maybe 6 or 7 minutes we're not fitting this into one video. I actually have about 12 planned. Because I think that's pretty much what it's going to be. So we're going to fit in nation chats with virtues chats as well. So it's all going to go. So we'll go from on a weekly thing and stuff like that. Because I think it will all work quite nicely. I think that's the point to take from that. And then we can all go and hopefully get many points across and have many lively debates. So this one tonight, we have our usual suspect here on my left. So, and we have the wonderful Matt down below me at the moment. So he plays it's Skywise Fal, isn't it?
Yes, Skywise Fal. So Orcs, like you might have heard when Smo was chatting, Orc names are backwards. My surname is first, so Skywise is my banner, that's my first name, and Fal is my actual name, so that comes second.
So
we also don't do honorifics, so we don't usually add titles for Fal the Magnificent, because we believe our names should be important on their own.
At the moment, it would be Fal the Poodle, if chat is anything to go by, and yeah, I'll bring that one into the field. I quite like that. Fal the Poodle. Obviously not to his face. So this one's going to be quite an interesting one because the Orcs have different outlook. I think that's the polite way of putting it on everything.
To a certain extent, we have a whole other religion that until fairly recently wasn't particularly legal within the Empire. We follow the way, at least the Imperial Orcs do, quite vehemently. There's quite a few zealots in our nation. I'd say almost every preacher is a zealot because we've picked that one religion and we're going to make it ours and we're going to make it work. But historically, 60 years ago, the Orcs as a species had many different ways of getting towards their afterlife, which isn't the labyrinth. seeing as we don't reincarnate. So we're almost the opposite end of the spectrum, as it were, from the rest of from humanity.
Yeah. Okay.
One chance, do it once, do it properly.
Yeah. Don't get me started on the whole orcs that believe they reincarnate is a pyramid scheme, because that's a topic for another day.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that we technically have to at least vaguely touch on the fact that some people say that some orcs think that they.
There are certain groups of orcs, shall we say, lower down, that believe they reincarnate because that's what they were told, because that keeps them subservient. If you tell an orc, well, you've only got one life, and if you don't do very well in this life, then I'm afraid you're going to fall into that big hole that we call the Howling Abyss, and you're going to die for a second time, then that sort of, might create some sort of rebellion or uprising when that orc that's been told that is like, well, I better have a good life before that happens to me.
Yeah, I mean, an awful lot of it is about what actually gets you across the labyrinth, what actually gets you across the abyss. And if anyone starts saying the thing that gets you across the abyss obviously is obedience and being a good boy,
it might be.
Is that the actual? Because as we said before, I don't know, so I will ask a lot of dumb questions here. Okay, so we got the abyss. So essentially a massive chasm in your afterlife.
Yes. So humanity has the abyss to look forward to, and the labyrinth. Yes. You have the labyrinth to look forward to. Oh, gee, I'm doing well, aren't I? And you'll travel through the labyrinth, and you'll get spat out again, or you'll walk out again, or whatever, and then you'll come back to the regular plane of existence, and you'll start that cycle. But orcs, ours is a little bit more metal, a little bit more permanent in its sort of ending, because when an orc leaves the physical plane, when they die, they, as far as we know, we get confronted with a chasm, or the Howling Abyss, a big hole in front of us, or it might be a small hole, we don't actually know how big it is, that we have to traverse. And it's called the Howling Abyss because it's full of orcs that are screaming and howling because they haven't attained the specific qualities of their tribe for their ancestors who were on the other side of the abyss to pull them across. So we get a second death, basically, or we get our sort of heaven, if you like, which is the furthest shore across the abyss, and we become ancestors, and we can impart knowledge and wisdom quite literally through our voices to orcs that still exist in reality. And a bit like the labyrinth and the way that is a religion of fact, we know that we have a howling abyss to go to, because the orcs that we hear who are our ancestors, you can recognize their voices. If you were related to them, or if you knew who they were in reality, you would know that that is them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that explains why. Because I remember in a battle I got separated, and I say separated, it was more to the point I think I was fighting properly and everyone else was fighting too slowly. And I caught up to the orcs, and I spent the rest of the battle fighting with the orcs. And I had so much fun, because you were all, anytime anything was happening was going bad, and you were all screaming to your ancestors and stuff like that. So that's the... Okay.
Yeah, so there's almost a little mechanical effect with the ancestors as well, because obviously we can't hear anything out of character. I've not got a mic in that someone's shouting at me and talking at me. It's all what our characters believe to be there.
Yeah.
But actually, you can expend hero points, and you can use the ancestor voices that you're listening to as like a boost to your courage or your morale.
Source of spiritual strength.
Yes, and you can use them as like a roleplay hook to get you to go big or go home, or to make you cower because there's loads of Druge shouting at you that you're not good enough and you're going to die here, so you're going to run away instead.
Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, considering so much of the Way of Virtue and the role-playing effects of that are built off of here are auras, here are things, push this way, push that way, give you an encouragement to roleplay more. That's the Orc way of doing it.
Yeah, and as we get more Imperial ancestors that are more virtue-based, then our aspect of the ancestors that we hear will become more in line with our own thinking. Because at the minute, we're still only 60 years in the Empire, so that's what, 2 generations. So like Fal's grandparents won't have been Imperial; they might have become Imperial, but they weren't to start with.
Right.
So their ancestors, as far as we are concerned, would have been barbarian.
And
so
what matters to them? Do they agree? And how often were those barbarian ancestors fighting the Empire?
Yeah.
Which is
often, and sometimes it happens in the Winds of Fortune or War. If you're in a particular battle, you will. Some people who have got Jotun ancestry, there might be a little tagline that says you find it really difficult to talk to Imperials from Wintermark or Varushka because they were slavers previously, and you've got an urge to act aggressively towards them. So there are definitely some quite proactive things that can come up from hearing your ancestors.
I've got a question on that front then. So when you fought the Jotun, obviously you feel aggressive towards Wintermark, whoever, and stuff like that because they were slavers previously. So when it comes to so in character you'll be in the field and you'd meet someone someone from Wintermark would wander over, you'd obviously be like, look, no, just piss off, leave me alone, don't want to talk to you right now, just leave me alone. How would you respond to someone who would say, I wasn't always Wintermark though, so I was born in Urizen, so it's like I've come this way?
I mean, my immediate instinct is the fact that egregore spirits exist. Being of a nation is way more profound than where you live. When you bind yourself to an egregore spirit, you become part of that nation. Whoever you were before, like, fair play, but it is that egregore spirit and that continuity of tradition that makes a nation.
Okay.
I'm a Wintermarker. I used to be a Rizeni. That's nice. You're a Wintermarker now. The egregore spirit would be my knee-jerk response, but I think everyone gets to do that on an individual basis.
Yeah, that's entirely up for the player to decide themselves. But like you say, once you've changed nation, you've kind of absolved of what you were previously, and you have now almost become an embodiment of the history of that nation. So you personally might not have always been Wintermark, but you're now wearing the trappings and you're practicing the traditions of that nation, who did some unfortunate things in the past that are now making me angry because I look at you and you look like those things that happened.
Okay, no, that's good. I'm not trying to work out my excuses at all here.
I mean, there was an even more particular one where it would be only people from Temeshwar. And that's really hard to tell. You can't, to look at a Liga, at least as far as I'm concerned, because I haven't read the League brief in its entirety, I don't necessarily know, in or out of character, the difference between a Temeshwari or a Tartan. So you can end up...
I speak for Mim here when I say there is a huge difference. And the Temeshwar brief is much more like Varushkan tending with fur trim and dark colours. But yes, the Liga are amazing for the individual city brief theme that still fit within the overall. But yeah, you're not going to be able to immediately spot that.
No.
And imagine going up to a Liga and saying that they're from a city that they're not from. You know, that's probably the most slanderous thing they've heard all day.
I mean,
how dare you say I look like a Temeshwari?
to be fair, you do have one huge advantage in the league in that, like you have banner names as surnames. The league will always have the name of their city as part of their actual name. So, hello, I am blah blah von Temeshwar. I am blah blah de Savos. It's an immediate knee jerk.
Yes, definitely.
Moonchild Majora said, unless they introduce themselves as Von Temeshwar, and then you just go for them.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, that role-playing effect only lasted for a season or so. So we're all good at the minute, I think, until the next thing happens. You know, until we unearth some sort of lost orc artifact that's got a bunch of ghosts in it that then rile us up again. But
yeah, Matt Dawes just said, for people inside the nation and who have read the briefs well, the cities are as different as the cultures in Wintermark. So yeah, I think that all comes down to if you know that nation's brief about all of that, then you will. I mean, it's like for me, I wouldn't have known that at all. So I quite like the whole finding this sort of stuff out in the field. So it gives me a chance to go up to people and say, oh, so what's this then? What's this then? I mean, my one time I was in the Orc encampment was I was unfortunately having a chat with my old character, as your general at the time, and yeah, we were just drunk, so I don't remember anything that was said. I remember I got threatened a lot, but yeah, that was it. But it was great. So, but I think that's the good thing, because we get a lot of new people in this chat, and they ask a lot of the questions I get. So if anyone does have any questions for Matt, then please ask. Any questions about the virtues in general, then please ask as well. I won't be answering any of these questions because I haven't got a clue. So, but I think that's all leads down to that's the good thing about Empire as a game. You get to go up to the people in these nations and ask them all these questions. I mean, I can't wait for the next event, and if we get one this year, and then I'm able to come up to the Orcs, because it's really high on my list. After having chats with people and like having exchanging messages with Matt and talking to yourself and Smo and that, it's like I need to make a point of doing this, because it throws, because we established with Smo that a lot of people will avoid the Orcs because some of them are intimidated by them. Some people I know have issues with masks as well. It's a legitimate fear, so people will avoid it.
I mean, we are quite an intimidating nation. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think I'm not, but I kind of forget how much my face changes when I put a mask on.
Oh, but yeah, you hit the nail on the head there.
People can't see my face.
So there's some questions in chat about Orcs and Virtue.
Yes, that's why we're here.
Oh, I'd forgotten that. So, how does one go and complain to a virtual assembly that someone is being naughty? How do Orc priests get on with other nations' priests?
Okay, so I think Orc priests have obviously, it's a fairly newly established thing. We haven't been priests throughout the whole time we've been in the Empire, and I think a lot of what we have learnt about virtue we've learnt from other human priests, and I think there's a lot of respect and kind of admiration that we'll have to a fellow. I don't know what the term would be, but a fellow priest, and I think a lot of what we teach, we're almost going to ask advice and ask guidance from these characters that have obviously had a lot more experience than us. I know, like as Fal, I can't necessarily teach about the kind of the minutiae of ambition or of courage because I can't be dedicated. But if I want my congregation to know it, then I'm more likely to go and find a dedicated priest to kind of ask their opinions and then forward that on.
Yeah, so one of the things for me that's different there is the way of virtue isn't about outcomes. It's process, it's a way of thinking, literally. So there's no there's no way that to say you are doing it wrong by not being dedicated. In fact, the Assembly of the Way exists quite specifically, so people can be priests without being dedicated to a virtue. It's not the Orc Assembly, the Orc Virtue Assembly. The current Cardinal of the Way is human, though the previous one was an Orc. There's a huge amount that you can learn just from having that conversation.
Oh, definitely. And I Fowl as the character has a lot of very strong opinions on whether or not you should be dedicated. Because as far as I'm concerned, 7 virtues is better than 1, and if you can have all of them, then why not? Why just kind of stick yourself in? Why pigeonhole yourself in one group? I know obviously to become an exemplar for humanity is important, and you have to pick one, or do you, to do that?
I mean, do you want that conversation? Because I can argue that one.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely have that. But I think that I think there's a lot of because we can't do a lot of the kind of physical, malleable skills, and kind of we can't imbue a congregation with an aura, or there's a lot of things we can look at humans and they can do, and I think there's definitely that respect, and I wish I could do what you could do.
Cool. I could anoint people. So that's kind of weird for me, especially. I love the auras and I love the priestly skills, and I get a huge amount of game out of it. But for me, one of the games that I get is someone coming to me and saying, I want to be anointed to ambition for this season because I'm doing a thing, and I'm like, no, you don't need that. Here, let's talk through what you actually want, what you actually need. And it's not an imposed feeling, it's to understand what it is that you actually want and how to get it. You don't need a mechanical effect in order to have an effect.
No.
And I think that some of the Orc priests I've met are astounding at sitting there and saying, okay, I'm going to talk to you as a priest, we're going to work out what it is you're actually aiming to do, and how we can use the lessons of virtue to get you there without ever needing to have a mechanical roleplay effect put on.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think there's probably, to some sort of out of character level, there's that kind of belief that, if you get a little ribbon that says you can do something, then you're a bit more likely to do it. Possibly. But I think, at least for orcs, as we are, kind of the knowledge that something is unattainable makes it more desirable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree.
I'm gonna jump in because these chats I love them. The fact that they're great for new players, and new players always ask good questions.
Cool.
In my eyes. So this is from One Hand Walrus. Hi, I'm new to LARP and Empire. Will be playing as a freeborn and was wondering how viable it was to play as a cynical PC, as a cynical character.
So, I have an answer, and it's this. What are you being cynical about? The way of virtue is literally, as far as we can tell, scientific method. It's just a way of thinking. There's nothing to be cynical about. We're not saying this is dogma, you must believe this. We're saying, here's doctrine, it's our best case. We think this is where we're at. And we're so confident that we'll ask you to test it. If you're going to be cynical, say, why is that doctrine like this? Then find a reason to prove it wrong or to make it better. The Orcs are an astounding example of that. They have made the only doctrinal changes in 7 years of game. They have added 2 new doctrines, essentially saying, like, this is where we're at. This is our baseline. Test these. So you can be as cynical as you like about, is this person, was that really a miracle? Or did this really happen? But fundamentally, the way of virtue is, it's not a faith. We're not asking you to believe.
No.
We're asking you to to accept. If you want, you can just ignore the whole game. You don't have to play with virtue,
No.
but it's really useful.
Yeah, it'd be a shame to miss it all out, really.
I ignored it for about 2 years because I didn't ignore it as my previous character, so I thought I'm ignoring it for a while, and then it's difficult to avoid. Really, you can ignore it for as best as you can, but you will always find that it's following you around. It's always there. You always will have people saying, what about this? But this, and what about that over there, though? And so what you are doing is very this, and so you should be, that's really good, well done, and stuff like that. I mean, for me, it was, I actually got told off by an orc, and I literally said the line, it's like, no, I don't care, and it's like, and I was there for 5 minutes. I was holding my beer. I was like, and I don't know who it was, but they literally lambasted me for like 5 minutes, and I was like, okay, I'm sorry, I think, I don't know. It was great. It was brilliant.
Honestly, there's this as well. Out of character, the way of virtue is a really good way of getting game. Like, literally, I here is virtue. Here is courage. The rules of courage say, find out if you're wrong and then change what you're doing. Find a thing that you do and do it as hard as you can. Don't let fear rule you on your trot. It's a good way of getting your face stuck into the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly possible to play a cynical character, but cynical in the way that you almost believe we're not at 100% peak efficiency. There's stuff that we can do better, and if you're cynical and you have something that you want to change, then that's great. That's an in to kind of see how the thing actually works.
Yep.
And especially as a new player, it's very hard to kind of describe what reality is at Anvil. And as soon as you hit that field and you see how it's like, it's almost entirely different to what you would expect.
Yeah, definitely. There's so we've got another new player in who's been, I think he's watched all of my streams actually. Ben, he's going off to Dawn. We're sorry.
Good choice.
I'm really sorry, Ben. Hopefully you recover one day. He has.
What's fantastic.
He has this idea. It's a really good one, and it's quite. I've never heard this, and I've been at Empire since the beginning, and I've never heard anyone say this. He said, "How will the Orcs feel about the campaign to get glory made of virtue?"
I mean, so we've got this thing, and it's called courage, and it's kind of better. In that I've seen a lot of orcs who have gone on glorious charges and smashed through a vanguard of Jotun barbarians and killed hundreds of orcs, and they've won the battle. But then, oh no, they're 5 miles away, and we can't get to them, and they bled out.
That is what Dawn's good at.
So
I think glory fits in its sort of half magic segment, and it fits really well there. But if you want to try and make it a virtue, then go ahead and try.
So Ava Shambles has just said glory is the result of virtuous action, and that is literally bang on what the Dornish National Assembly has said repeatedly, that love and glory come from virtue.
Yeah, that
virtue is the process. Love can lead you to be virtuous. Glory is what happens when you are virtuous. In a lot of way, glory is a lot like both Wintermark heroism and Orc worth. In a way, it is something that you do, you make it amazing, but you've done it because you're virtuous.
Yes,
that's really cool. Here's what happens afterwards.
I think. Go on, Matt. Sorry, go on.
It's probably worth mentioning that the 7 virtues that we have aren't the only virtues or non-virtuous spiritual ailments that exist.
Yeah.
There have been more, and the 7 that we've got have almost been come to by a very long process of weeding out the things that contradict each other and don't work together. And we found this group of 7 that fit, and they're all working together as a team, and they mesh. Glory at one point could have been a virtue for Dawn, much like purity was for Highguard.
Mm-hmm.
But if it doesn't mesh, or it's kind of like another one, but it's not that different enough, then it's not necessarily going to fit. But there's no reason not to try.
It's entirely possible as well to look through all of the true virtues, all of the false virtues, look at the lessons of them, and sit there and try and look for the commonalities and look for the differences.
It's something I enjoyed doing on. There was a couple of skirmishes where you would meet these like smaller tribes and groups of people, and they were all followers. Like one of them that we got sent on was because these people were following a false virtue, and we got there, and it was, I think it was love, and that was amazing. That was because we were there. We turned up. This was me leading. I think it was 35 Navarre, and we were all heavily tooled up. And we turned up, and they all just sat in a circle, unarmed, just chatting away, being lovely to each other. We turned up, and then they were saying, like, "Oh, not really nice to meet you," and they're being lovely. And we're just like, don't know how to respond to this. Really don't know how to respond to this. And then it kept on. It was like. They were just being really nice. It was also like, look, but you know it's a false virtue. And it was like, but is it though? And they were being very polite and everything like that. And we were just like, okay. They were trying to hug us and stuff like that. And then it turned out they had like this Valorn spore on their neck, and that was what was doing it all. And so we got to brutally murder 35 unarmed people. But hey, it was virtuous. And that was how we got. It was like,
yep.
Yeah, I don't know.
You scuppered their travel to the labyrinth.
Yes.
You got them somewhere that'll change their mind and make them follow a better path quicker.
But it was I think that's what the virtues bring to the game, though. I mean, you get people talk about the false virtues. I know of someone in character who doesn't believe in the virtues at all. He believes in a false virtue, and it was just like, okay, and no, that is it. That's all I'm saying there. But the way he talks about it is fantastic, and I'm sitting back there going, "Oh, if I wasn't on drugs right now, I probably still wouldn't do anything." But it was just like he's thought about it so much, and the argument is so good. It's like, okay, part of me wants to see you get pulled up for heresy and then argue that one, because I will be there for that, and I will hand out drinks. It was so good.
Yeah. One of the massive benefits of the way of virtue is, tell us we're wrong, we'll change our mind, give us more information, and we'll adapt. And that's massively. We used to believe that this was a true virtue, and now we have changed our mind because we found new evidence, because we discussed new ideas, because we built a new philosophy. We've got that scope. If you want to, as part of your character's lifestyle choices, to find a false virtue, to follow that false virtue and to try to make it a true virtue, then fill your boots. It is an argument that you can make to priests without preaching, by asking the right questions, and if you do it right, you won't get up for heresy. You won't get done for heresy right up until the point that you actually start preaching it.
Yes.
There needs to be more preaching. So there's a nice conversation going on in chat at the moment between Grey Malkin and Moon Child Majora. There's a lot to read through there. I'm not going to read through it, basically. But it's discussing about glory and does it give off an aura? Am I reading that right? If I've read that wrong, then let me know in chat. Danger zone, yeah. So discussion is great. That's what the virtues are there for. That it causes conversations to be had. And that's why it is so good in game.
It encourages action. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Ben says, I feel like I started something. Yes, Ben, and you should be sorry. It's all good.
On that cheerful note, I assume that we get to come back to the Virtue and Glory section when we're doing Dawn. Because
yes.
that sounds like Dawnish National Assembly to me. And let's talk about Orc stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, our equivalent of Glory is much better, and it's called Worth.
How dare! It is equivalently good, okay?
I'm not sure, because Worth can be seen in other Hearth Magics under a different name.
So
Carry on.
So they're asking about. I'm curious. So what we're gonna have to do then? So, a question from Jack: how accessible do you think the religion game is in the Imperial Orcs?
Very, because there's only about 10 preachers on the entire field, so you can have a massive impact as a new Imperial Orc preacher. I'd also say for our nation, it might be less accessible because it's very hard to find all of us in one go because there's fewer of us and we all do other things. And we have kind of less access to assemblies as the other 9 nations do. So we have access to the General Assembly, and is the Way Assembly a separate one, or is it all?
Yes, it is. Yep, the
So
Assembly of the Way has an assembly and has a cardinal. All of that, you can put virtue statements up to it, no problem.
Yeah. So we've got access to both of them and to our National Assembly. And as a preacher, you have the ones. I mean, apart from the horrible poisonous Ribena that you have as your resource that you can't use, you have votes in Synod that are quite big and meaty and very important, and you have the ability to address the entire empire. Your statement of principle, which is a little A5 sheet of paper that you can write pretty much anything on, goes out to the whole empire, and will go out to every orc in Scarthind and everyone everywhere. And you can make quite large changes within the game just from that one bit of paper.
Hugely. Honestly, the statements of virtue, statements of on the Synod board are the closest thing you get to a free text downtime. They get to say, we want people to think this. We want the game to look at that. We want to make the world different, and it's amazing.
So
one of the things I really like doing is like specifically for the orcs is recognizing people, because a lot of our game as orcs is you've got one life, so you've basically got to become famous, otherwise you're not getting across that howling abyss. And recognizing people in a way that you can show them off to the entire empire is amazing.
That sounds really glorious, and I like it.
It sounds like it's worthwhile. There's a question that I missed, and it's a good one. So I'll throw this one Matt's way. Dave, sorry that I missed this, Dave. Could I ask what the process is between holding a false virtue and how it could get to the point where the Inquisition executes someone for it?
Okay, so as I believe it, you can only be dedicated to a false virtue if you find someone else who is also dedicated and you have that ceremony performed on you. So it's quite a difficult thing to find in and of itself.
So the other thing is you don't have to be dedicated to a virtue in order to follow it. You can not be dedicated at all and be a justice follower, for instance.
But if you wanted to be, well, I say if you wanted to be, but if you're in the place that your character is going to meet their end because of that virtue, I think you'd probably need to be dedicated for there to be enough evidence stockpiled against you. No? Okay.
I mean, so this is as much as I'm aware of, and I might be wrong, but Inquisition is a player-driven action. All religious crimes are judged by players. They are the only crimes where guilt and innocence is defined by inquisition, by players. The magistrates will give them sentence, but a priest. But it's up to the priest who put the inquisition forward to say whether or not someone's actually guilty of heresy, as in following a false virtue and preaching it. So you can just follow a false virtue and sit there and be like, well, I think justice is a great idea. As long as you sit there and only talk to other priests to explain your point of view, you can sit there and say, well, technically, all I'm doing is expressing robust argument. I'm debating doctrine.
Yeah.
If you ever preach to anyone who is not a priest, and by that what I mean is talk to anyone who's not a priest about it, because as a priest you are implied to have an authority. That means that if you say something is so when it's about the way of virtue, a lay person can assume that it's probably so.
Okay.
That gets into preaching really, really fast. So technically it is possible for you to say, I want to make glory a virtue. I will go about this by only ever talking to priests about it, finding as much evidence as I can to support that, and eventually, when I have enough information, sharing that with priests and persuading them, then putting that statement up on the board and having it agreed by a greater majority of the General Assembly, and blah, 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 blah. If along that thread, in any way, somebody comes up to a priest and says, I think this person is preaching glory, that's when you start to have a problem.
Yeah.
You can get executed for preaching a false virtue if the magistrates think that it is appropriate. You can be judged as guilty of that heresy by PCs in an inquisition, but what the punishment is can be anything the magistrate decides, anything from a fine to a curse. Freezing Brand of Irenaeus is really popular, to remedial education, to execution.
I'm quite curious now. What does the Freezing Brand do? What's that curse?
Freezing Brand of Irenaeus, you've probably seen some photos of people mark like that on their cheeks. The Looking Glass ladies at the moment have them, and it's amazing. It is a curse. It lasts for a year. When it is imposed on you, if anyone asks, what's that scar? You have to tell them why you got that scar, honestly and accurately.
And if you don't?
Then I can't remember if it is an imperative, as in, no, you actually have to do this. Oh, thank you very much. Matt Dorswood has just put a link to what the Freezing Brand of Irenaeus is. I'm going to click on that and we can all read it.
Burning pain. Ooh.
Yeah.
But yes,
then smiley face. I like it.
There was a time when, before Doctrine changed, orcs who taught other orcs openly that ancestors would help you across the abyss, or that there are other paths other than virtue to get you across the abyss. There have been orcs that have come up against magistrates and faced fines and the like because they were, I guess, preaching heresy, or at least preaching sort of malpractice.
Okay. So Ben has asked a question. This is more of an orky question. I've lost it. What virtues do you think are most orky?
Ambition, courage, and pride are all of them. All of them are good. Ambition was what made us join the Empire. Thrace is an exemplar of ambition. Courage gives us the kind of courage and the knowledge that what we're doing is right, and the kind of the drive to keep going forward and acting on what we know. And pride is very much like, well, we're the best orcs in the world, and we're going to continue being the best orcs in the world because we are part of the Empire. But all the others are good, and I don't think, from a from personal experience, I don't think one of them is better than the other. You can pick any of them. Yeah.
That's there you go, Ben. That one's for you. Nice save from asking about glory. So when it comes to we'll take it, we'll drag it back, kicking and screaming to the orcs, because that's what you're here for. So when it comes to a lot of the virtue side of it all, and having the void as the abyss rather as a thing, how does I'm trying to piece it together in my own head of how you go from, you've got the virtues there that you believe what you pick and choose and you do what you need, and then you have the abyss. I will call it the abyss. I will remember it when I can. So you've got the abyss, but you've also got the labyrinth as well. So what's the fundamental differences there for in an orc's eyes?
So there are some people who believe that the labyrinth and the abyss are connected in some sort of ethereal, unknown way. There are lots of people that have got lots of crazy ideas. As far as we are concerned, because our species are so different, they're just not entwined at all, and that our destiny is the abyss, and that's where we're going to end up. And humans are going to end up at the labyrinth. Every orc tribe in existence, so all the foreigners, all the barbarians, all believe in the abyss. Much like I'm pretty sure every human nation believes in the labyrinth. It's not just the empire, so it's not just.
But do we know? I mean, there's a lot of. Anyway, we can move on. That's.
Yeah.
No, we don't. But
orcs do believe in the abyss. Yeah. Mostly because of the massive advantage when it comes to practical philosophy of having ancestors howling in your brains that we totally jumped this crevasse.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember they're only howling in our brains because we're not following the correct belief system. You know, we've got Druj and Jotun and Grendel and Thule ancestors because we're all descendants of those, and we're like the cast-off tribe. We used to be them, but we found our own strength, and we found our own path, and they don't like that.
Yeah.
Whereas orcs in the other barbarian tribes have all got ancestors from their own tribe that are G'ing them up, that are, that are telling the Grendel, go and get rich, go and plunder, and amass a super amazing amount of wealth, and that will get you to cross the abyss. Or the Druj that are saying, go and poison 1,000,000 Navarre, and that will get you across the abyss. Or the Thule that basically say you have to become immortal and become a dragon, and then that will get you across the abyss.
So that one sounds like fun, though. Who wouldn't want to be a dragon?
It's not an actual dragon. It's a metaphorical dragon.
I know, but
just
still,
want to clarify that one.
I'm seeing.
Everyone sits there and goes, orcs are like larval form of dragons.
I'm seeing some new doctrine that needs to be brought into play here. Sorry.
But one thing to remember is that obviously, as Imperial Orcs, we know that there are other ways to get across the abyss, and we know there are other paths that we could take, but we are so proud of our own and proud that we have we've taken the strength to make our own way across the abyss. You know, we've forced and forged our path, that we're not going to listen to those ancestors that are shouting at us, that say we could take the easy way and we could turn on our Imperial brothers and sisters and we could take the Druj way out.
Yeah.
I don't fancy going to the Druj side of the abyss. I fancy going to the Imperial side with all of my ancestors that I know and have lived with and remember.
And aren't liable to poison you for shits and giggles. Or enslave you for fun.
that too. Okay, so there have been a couple of questions. John asked a question. I think that has been dealt with. Putting you on fake football yobbo voices as an orc and stuff like that. I had it was like one of my favourite orcs was. It turns out other people weren't overly keen on, but it was the Australian. And
I mean, I would say to accents in general, it's hard enough remembering this whole world, let alone doing that through another voice.
True.
And especially for Imperial Orcs, we are very much not any other incarnation of Orcs that you get. We're very much different from Lord of the Rings Orcs or the kind of more barbaric Orcs you get at Drakenfest or other LARPs. We are a civilized nation of citizens who have taken on this kind of this way of life that is more centered around learning and teaching and growing rather than just being, I'm going to go and fight everyone.
Yeah. I mean, speaking as someone who puts on a really bad fake Irish accent for his character, the accent drops a lot. I had an entire conversation with a Varushkin with his fake Russian accent, and we swapped accents quite a lot during the conversation, and it was brilliant. So I think it can be good in certain aspects. I mean, I thought the player in question, I thought his accent was quite good, and it made me chuckle a lot, and I quite liked it. I think it's down to individual players and stuff like that, though, as well. That's cool. Right, we're getting we're getting a lot of questions again. So I'm gonna scroll up again. So there's one from Matt asked a question on behalf of Kat, I believe. It's a question from Kat. What's the difference between the human spirit and orc souls?
On a broad technicality, as far as we know, one reincarnates and one doesn't. One hears the voices of their ancestors and one doesn't. One can use the owl and the other one can't.
Yeah.
There you are.
I don't know if I'd want to hear the voice of my ancestors. They'd be really angry with me.
This goes in really neatly to the latest question that's just come in saying, do orcs have past life visions or an orky version of it? No, they don't.
Nope.
No. Orcs have ancestors. Humans have past lives.
We have no way of knowing if that's even possible, because the way that humans have past life visions is through True Liao, and we have no ability to use that, and there will never be a chance to use anything equivalent to Liao. There are orcs that believe they reincarnate in foreign tribes. There are certain Jotun that believe they reincarnate.
Yeah.
That will teach that practice to keep them kind of ticking along with their traditions.
Yeah.
But as Imperial Orcs, and as the majority of the tribes that exist locally, we have one life, and that's it.
Okay.
Don't waste it.
Yeah. Unless you can prove to me that you've had a past life, then I'm not going to believe that we have them.
Interesting. That's good. There was another one. Someone. I hear this person's awful. This is from Foul in chat.
Oh no!
Terrible. Yeah, who would do this? What dictates whether an orcish ancestor is heard, aside from crossing the abyss in the first place? Matt, do you want to take this question?
I will. So, thank you for asking that, Andy. That's a good question. The only ancestors that an orc will hear are direct relatives, so parents, grandparents, further up the family tree,
right,
or people that you know in life who have then died and gone to the abyss. So all of the barbarian ancestors that Fal hears will be his great, however many grandparents. which is why generally you only have one tribe of barbarian ancestors that you listen to, because they don't cross really. So Val has Thule ancestors, or like the Imperial ancestors that are sort of growing in number slowly. They will be people that we have met in life that have had a big impact on us. So like Stormcrow Kaladar, who was, I believe, one of the first archmages that was an orc. Ironside Bruck is also there, to name a few. They've all done big things as characters that then those player groups have decided that they can hear them as ancestors.
Yeah.
And then whether we want to hear them as well is up to us.
Okay.
But it's not you can hear anyone. It's quite specific.
Okay. Is there because with so if an orc was to take something like Goose Whisper, something like that, that's a drug or anything that would promote a vision or anything like that, how does that work with the orcs? Would they see like an ancestor who'd be there basically berating them or giving them advice or something like that?
I don't know, because I've never taken any drugs at Empire. I also don't know any orcs that have. So it might affect them, but I don't know whether, I guess depending on the ref present, it might have a different effect if a human and an orc take the same thing.
Would you like to try this? I will supply, and I will drag you off to a tent.
I mean, I'm not sure what conversation we're going to have that's going to lead to that.
No, Mac, it would generally be, here, do you want a drink? So I'm really joking there. I'm really joking there. Okay, I know it's lowbrow, but it's a joke. Goose Whisper parties are a thing. Sorry, Karen.
For what it's worth, specifically Goose Whisper Infusion, she says, reading off the wiki, gives you a vision which are the same as received from Signs and Portents ritual. So it doesn't. How you get it is going to be a role-playing experience. The role-playing effect, the outcome of the ritual will be a ref saying, "Here is a note. Read this. This is the information that you'll get." Yeah. So the how you get it. Is
okay. Okay. That's good then. That's a
There's nothing on it that says there's anything the same or different for a human taking it as an orc taking it.
Okay, that's really good then. I like that. So I had no. I thought I was stumbling across something there that could be quite an interesting thing to find out, but ruined. No, that's good then. So I'm quite curious though. Now, if there's any way to make it so that a human would hear the equivalent of the ancestors or something like that. Is there
honestly, that sounds an awful lot like, why don't you talk to a mage?
Yeah.
An AP, have fun with that. It sounds like something you might get off day, maybe.
I have no idea, so I will be doing that in the field. So there we go. That's
essentially, that is a bit beyond what we can discuss. As far as we are aware, there is no way of doing that. The streams don't cross.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, that's something for Mac to do in play then, and yeah, that'll be good then. So we're getting a few more. Right, I think when it comes to a lot of, there's so much that we can do with the orcs. There's so much that people don't know, and there's a lot of things that people don't. They have issues with going up to talks. I mean, it was like having that. When you see people, it's like we touched on it with Smo, where people are at the gates, and we know they don't have to be there. Matt does, who is my linker extraordinaire in chat. So thank you for that. A lot of people don't come in because there's all these rumours and things about what you can do to get into the orc camp, what you can't do, or you must do this, and you must do this, and stuff like that, which is great in character. So what would you say, Matt, as someone who is playing one of the orcs, to get people into camp, what would be your advice to someone who wants to come and have a chat?
Have a reason to want a chat. Have like a topic that you want to talk about. The reason why the Orc camp seems fairly insular is because of the way, because our nation is a lot smaller than everyone else's. Our camp almost feels like one player group.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily go into Dawn or Wintermark and go up to like the Durondals or Dunhearth and just sort of ask your way into their camp.
Yeah.
But and it's kind of the same with our camp. It's sort of, but we also want to show it off. Like there's a lot of really cool things in our camp and a lot of really cool people in our camp. So as long as you've got a reason to be there, and it could just be, I want to come and meet some orcs because I've never met an orc before. It's very reasonable to say, as a citizen of the Empire, I haven't seen an Imperial orc before because either I don't fight, so I haven't fought with them in the battles, or I've never been to Anvil because there's not many of us, and we don't travel throughout the Empire, generally speaking. So even just saying I want to come and meet some, that's a good enough opener.
The only time I've been in was when there was an Inquisition held in the fighting ring. It just looks so very, very different. Being in the woods gives it a massively different feel to things. The area is set up really effectively and atmospherically.
How long does it take for everyone? Because everyone gets there like the day before, don't they? Normally as well.
Most of us try and get down on Thursday, yeah. So a lot of the Orc camp stays on site, so the pit will stay where it is, and a lot of the kind of outside palisade, as it were, stays there because it's part of the forest.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of building that we do, and I think it helps because we're all building that one area. You can get a lot done in not very much time, and everyone's good at pitching in and helping out.
Yeah.
Tidying stuff away at the end as well.
Chris in chat informs me that the best thing to do in order to get into the Orc camp is to bring cake.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyone will buy cake. That's a good reason.
Yeah, it's I think it's just something that's all I think I'm always going to
I think
bring up and stuff. So
I think what I will say is the only reason someone would stop you going into camp is because they want to have an encounter role playing with you.
Yeah.
Or it might just be there's something quite personal going on inside the camp, like we're having a lands meet, or there's a grudge match between two orcs and we don't want anyone else watching. But generally, if you're turned away, it's either for a very good reason, or it's that orc wants to have a bit of a to and fro with you, and there's not really any wrong answers.
Matt emphasises that cake isn't actually a requirement. Please don't think you have to.
No.
And roleplay is much, much better.
Yeah, I think we established that with Smo as well. Yeah, cake is not a requirement, but questions and curiosity, I think, was the best way to describe it. I know that I will definitely be, coming in, but I need to come and have a chat with a certain Fal anyway. So for icy reasons. There was another question I saw earlier from someone else who that Fal. He asks all the right questions, doesn't he, Matt? It was, what's the difference between a shaman and the other one? And a preacher.
Okay, so shaman are our spiritual guides when it comes to the ancestors. So they have one of their perks of their archetype is they can hear ancestors stronger or more clearly, or they can hear more of them than the rest of us. They're just a bit more spiritually in touch, and they are part of what forms the leadership of the banners and the legions. So a bit like a warlord, there's kind of a pairing of, I guess, like head of the household and head of pastoral care.
So that's not a mechanical thing, is it? It's just a role play effect.
No, it's entirely role play. So it's up to you. Yeah,
So-
you will never get given a slip of paper in your pack saying you hear such and such an ancestor, or you hear an ancestor of a specific tribe, unless you've done something like a ritual or taken a massive amount of goose whisper or something to effect that. It's all entirely up to you.
Yeah. So a shaman is about past life. It's about ancestors and the voices you hear, and preachers are about the way of virtue in the future.
Yes, so shaman are sort of traditional spiritual guides, and preachers are the ones that we have come to listen to since we've become imperial, who will teach us our new path in virtue and to cross the abyss. So they are definitely very different, but their sort of goal and what they're aiming to teach you is along the same lines.
That's really cool.
Smoke has also said in one event some shamans did get notes in the pack about hearing ancestors.
So one of the things that PD used to seed plot is the archetype that a player chooses. So it's really helpful to pick an archetype because plot is often seeded to, for instance, all of the troubadours, all of the bravos, all of the, in this case, shaman.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Chris John, he's just said it's with asking for an orc by the name. So going in and saying I'm looking for the orc with the scary face, bald, wrappings is like asking for Wulfric in Wintermark.
If in doubt, try to find what someone's name is. It makes your life approximately 11 billion easier.
Yes, for myself, I know about Skywise File, and I do have lots of questions. So I definitely have icy reasons to come and find you and poke you, and then be very, very curious about how you've managed to hide all of that hair under your mask. How do you do it? I think there's a question right at the beginning. How you managed to do it?
It's a very secret, lesser known fact that we have a bunch of humans who follow us around before we come to Anvil, who are very good at plaiting hair and and looking after our personal well-being. I do believe that somehow I have just asked what is the role of a preacher versus the shaman again. So I guess I just need to clarify maybe a bit more what a preacher is.
Yeah.
Yes. I think Matt asked that as well. And a preacher.
So we are the orcs that try to guide you not away from your ancestors, but towards those very far fewer imperial ancestors that we hear, and try and big up sort of how useful the virtues are in our daily life, in our sort of usual existence, to make them as accessible and kind of useful as possible. Because we're a very practical nation, we'll use the tools that make our life easier. And once we understand that virtue is one of those tools, then you're kind of better equipped. And also, it's one of those sort of recurring circles where the more orcs that are virtuous cross the abyss to create more virtuous ancestors that will then create more virtuous orcs, and we're trying to up the numbers, basically.
Okay, that's good. Was the question? Moonchild Majora, as a preacher, what is the ideal Imperial Orc ancestor?
I mean, the ideal Imperial Orc ancestor is Thrace.
He is super good.
Or a virtuous one. However, no one has heard Thrace. And we're not sure why.
Okay, excellent stuff. Go on, you were going to say something else?
No, that's I'm going to keep my answers short.
I think Thrace is actually really, really interesting as an exemplar, and I think Orcs are a really good example of how we can learn the lessons of virtue from regardless who wants to teach them. It is the intent, the actions, the outcome that matter, not necessarily whether you can follow virtue in and of yourself.
Yes, and especially, and I especially say for Thrace, because he might have never become Imperial. He was certainly a barbarian when the rebellion started. His kind of ability to become an exemplar proves that through your action and your deed, rather than your belief, kind of proves the reason for virtue.
Fundamentally, we learn from the examples around us.
Yeah.
We have, I think it's really important for the way of virtue to be understood as this is a science experiment. This is us learning from everything we have around us. This is a set of behaviours that work really well. Here is an evidence that says you can in fact create a nation. That's super ambitious. That's amazing. You don't have to be human for us to be able to respect. You did that.
Yeah.
You changed the world. That's what virtue does.
Ben is trying to push glory onto the Orcs now.
Yeah, a bit like how past life visions are the human's proof for the labyrinth. Thrace was our proof that virtue works.
That's really cool. So I say this every single time, I try to limit these to an hour, so we've been going for an hour and 20. No, it's becoming it's a normal thing. I say to my wife, I'm only going for an hour. She's like, right, hour 45 then. So yeah. So we'll do like so I think we've got probably a last question. So virtuous ancestors screaming virtue is like how the barbarians have their ancestors geeing them up for a thing like honor for the Jotun.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I think like we've said, virtue is our version of Jotun honor or Druge cunning. That's the thing that we cling to, that we stick to as our truth, as our path. And us deviating from it makes it weaker and kind of dissipates it. But the more we buy into it, the better it is for us.
Excellent. So I think I'll be calling it there. I'll explain what's going to happen in the future with this. I'm no longer stream over a weekend. That's my family time now. Okay, so it'll be, I'm going to 3 streams a week. So it'll be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that's how it'll be running. I'm going to be doing a nation chat, probably on Mondays, then a little whatever I want to do on a Wednesday, and Friday will be maybe virtues and for that specific nation. So if we can do Fridays, or I might sort them around to the Mondays to make it easier. This will be have a little bit more of a chat. So when I do a nation, it will probably be 2 streams that week on that nation. So if I do Dawn next, then it will be Monday and Friday, and it will be just what Dawn's like and the virtues within that nation. And then we get a lot of questions, and I think it would be great for people who are new to the game, because these are all, as I say, going onto my YouTube. So then it will be good, and everyone can then just go, this, and it gives a nice bit of input as well from someone who will chat a lot about the nation, and someone who will chat a lot about the virtues, and it gives everyone a great insight to everything they do. So thank you everyone for being here, and thank you everyone for watching. Thank you so much, you two, for educating me.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you for
It's been
hosting.
really enjoyable.
I know that there's loads of questions that we haven't got around to answering.
Yes, there's a lot. We will keep. I mean, I'm sure when it comes to the virtue side of it, I think a lot of the questions will keep coming back up. So if I've missed any, so that they will keep coming. They will keep coming back. But this was really, really good. I will get. One of Rachel, who watches normally, she created these emojis for me. So there's one just in chat at the moment of me doing that. So thanks, Joe. But we will get this all going, and hopefully I'll get some more giveaways arranged and stuff as well for people, because we sort a lot of stuff out for new players and stuff. And someone won a nice big pack from Darkblade as well that we sorted. So, and thankfully she was a brand new player too, so it's really, really good. So she'll turn up to her first event and get a load of stuff from Darkblade. So you can't complain at that. So that's really awesome. So thank everyone for watching, and I will be streaming again tomorrow. So I'll put stuff out on Facebook about what we're doing and stuff like that. Okay. So thanks everyone, and we will see you next time. Okay, yeah. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.